Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to Journalistic Writing. If you remember in our last class, we started talking about news writing, and we talked about, how this news register, of course, is different from social or day-to-day, register. And then, of course, we moved towards talking about different schools of thought, who have or who hold different opinions about the presence or the existence or the creation of news in the world. And then we try to talk about the structure of news and all. I'll start from the same point where I left, but of course I would like to recapitulate some important things so that you could really understand what actually that structure was all about. And then of course we'll move forward. The two schools of thought which we discussed in the last class, of course they conflict with each other about the existence of the news, the presence of the news, and the creation of the news. I mean, one school of thought is of the view that news, is very much present all around us. Okay, news exists in this world. News reporter's job is just to go and convey that news through some appropriate medium, to the readers. So this is, one view about the presence actually of the news. The second school of thought is of the view that news does not exist actually. It's not present around. Nobody knows about it. These are actually news reporters who create news. News reporters actually tell the readers what they're going to read. Of course, there are always questions in front of readers that what they want. I mean, what is interesting and what is important. Interesting means, what they want to read, and important means, what they ought to read. So these are news reporters actually who tell the readers, advise and guide the readers what they ought to read. This school of thought, the later one, often, claims and, then sports their claim by quoting some important events from the past. Especially the Persian War, in the war, which was fought between Iran and, Iraq. They say, that time there were 90 more wars actually being fought all over the world. But it was media actually which advised or which, forced the readers that which war they're going to hook to, which war they're going to read about. Also, when, this United States, fought war with this Iraq, and United States, war, with Afghanistan. During all these wars, actually, of course, there are clashes, there are fights being fought all over the world, but it's the media actually which made people, get hooked to these wars. So this is what actually the concept of the creation of news. Whatever school of thought, there are, but I believe all of them, of course, they agree to the larger part of this, news thing, and that is news is something, of course, which is out of the ordinary. News is new, of course. I mean, something which people do not know about, and of course, people want to read, listen, and talk about. This is something, all about news thing. I would like to quote Charles A. Dana, who talked about the news thing. He, through his quote, he gave two very important characteristics of news. I mean, he said, if these two characteristics are present in any event, in any happening, or in any incident, that happening, incident, or event can, of course, be called a news. Let's take a look of Charles' views. He says that anything that interests a large part of the community and has never been brought to its attention before. Now, anything which interests or which affects the large or the larger part of the community, number one, and number two, which has never been told before. So here, actually, what? Impact of the news, and number two, the novelty of the news. Now, these two important factors, if these two characteristics are present, or these two, features are present in any event, that event can qualify to be called, of course, a news. And then, there is another, quote. This is said by, Evelyn Waugh describes news. News is what the chap who doesn't care much about anything wants to read. This is what the view about news is. But very frankly speaking, all masters of the art, all of them, they are agree on certain points, like 6-7 points, and they say, like, these are actually, you can say, the qualifications of the thing which we call as news. And those 7 characteristics or 7 features or 7 qualities actually, or you can say a yardstick composed of 7 points, one by one, like, when incidents and happenings, they keep on fulfilling those points, of course, they become news. And even like, that incident or happening, which could have been inside, would have been outside on the main page. Those points are like impact, number 1. Number 2, proximity. And of course, impact, that number of people are affected by. Proximity means, the closeness of that, event or news. Timeliness, the freshness of that. Prominence, novelty, and conflict, and audience. Now, these are 7 points which you can say the best yardstick for any event, to be called actually a news. Now, let's focus on the 3 fundamental characteristics of news that we call as the ABC of news or the news writing. Number 1, A for accuracy. All the facts and figures, all the details which you're quoting in your news or you're reporting in your news, they should be accurate. Brevity. Your news is going to be, or the piece or the body which you're preparing for the readers to read, that has to be compact. And C for clarity. It has to be very much clear. If, something is clear, people are, of course, going to understand it, and people can, of course, react the way, of course, news reporters or the newspaper people actually, want from. Dear students, news writing of the news actually is not that difficult actually as it is usually, assumed. Very frankly speaking, we have 6 questions, like who, what, when, where, why, and how. These questions are called as the crux of the news writing. These are not just 6 questions actually. These are, 6, you can say, aspects of information, which human beings actually want to be fulfilled. The moment, like, you fulfill these aspects of information wants of the people, of course, the sense of completion will be there, and people, of course, they would say, yes, now we understand the thing, of course, in full. Now, those questions, we call it, the crux of the news writing. For example, who? Who means, like, who are, the participants in that news writing or news events. For example, newspaper and the reader, TV and its viewer, and radio and its listeners, for example. Now, these are like, the parties, you can say, or the participants. We have to see the relationship, with each other. If you remember, during the time we were talking about journalistic, writing, language of the newspapers over there, we compared 2 newspapers, Quality and Popular. This is what actually the relationship is. People like, who are hooked to the middle market, papers, they, of course, have something, informal or somewhat like informal relationships, with the media. And people like who are to like quality, let's say journalism, of course, the relationship over there is formal. And this is what actually is ideology about. And this is what actually the aim is about, that you want people to read and enjoy stories about, or you want people to read and enjoy factual information and ultimately, of course, the truth. So who is, something which is very important. Second one is, what? What's the news and what does this mean to them? To them mean, of course, the readers. What's the news and what does this news mean to them? This is, the what factor. And where? Where, of course, is the proximity, the closeness of the news, okay? And all the details which are, place-related facts and figures, you can, of course, involve inside the news story. And then comes, when. When is, of course, the currency factor, time-related facts and figures, you are going to add, of course, to your news story. And then comes why. This is something which is important, that why I'm writing, a reporter is going to ask himself a question, that why I'm writing this and why should my readers read it? Now, these 2 questions. And the last one is, how it should attract, my readers. Now, look here, these are the 6 questions. if you, answer these 6 questions, there is in front of you a news report ready to be printed, of course. Now, let's, study a case. For example, you want to, report, let's say, a sports event, So, same questions you're going to ask yourself. You are going to ask yourself, what? I mean, what's the competition? So, answer this question first of all. Collect information about it. What's the competition like, is going to happen? Number 2, who? Like, who are the teams? Number 1. And then, who is the coach? Who are the prominent players? And who are the sporters? The teams, their coaches, their prominent players, I mean, the sports celebrities, and then, the sporters who are going to watch this event. Then comes when factor. When, of course, means the time factor, of course, that when, this match or this tournament is going to be, played, and how long these teams, have been preparing, for this tournament. Then comes, where is the place factor? Ask yourself, like, where so-and-so, match is going to be played. And then comes, why? I mean, why are they entering this particular competition? And what's the importance of this competition? And the last question which you're going to ask yourself questions and collect information about is how? Like, how this event is going to be organized, who are, of course, the organizers, and the matters of fundraising, how much training, they have done, and what will they need to, do to win. So all these questions, when you're going to answer, you have all the aspects of information, which can guarantee the completeness, of course, in your news. And of course, people, when going to read your story, there will not be any aspect, any side of the news which will be unfulfilled, or people will really feel, something as if still not quenched. So this is how you go about in very fundamentally speaking, writing about the news. Let me recapitulate. Very fundamental, very basic idea of news writing is WH questions. Collect information about these WH questions. You have all the matter now available with you, and these questions you are going to answer meaningfully and effectively. That meaningful and effective structuring of these answers, of course, I'm going to tell you in the next part of this lecture. But fundamentally speaking, news writing revolves around these 6 questions, which we call as the crux of the news writing. That's why I told you right in the beginning that news writing is not difficult. It's easy. Yes, it requires, demands lots of practice, You will be needing these 6 questions plus the typical, specialized structure of the news, which of course I'll tell you later on. Now I would like to throw light on the structure of news, or you can say the organization of news, the full-fledged body of the news, like what comes first, what comes second in report, what comes, third or fourth or fifth, onwards. This I would like to highlight through John Updike's all-time green and my favorite, quote. What he says, I want stories to startle and engage me within the first few sentences. Now, these sentences are very meaningful, and they are telltale also. Why they are telltale? Because they reflect upon the structure, the body, the whole, fall and the flow of the news, writing and the report. What he says, I want stories to startle and engage me within the first few sentences. And in their middle, to widen or deepen or sharpen my knowledge of human activity. And to end by giving me a sensation of completed statement. Now, dear students, in this, quote, what we have, seen, he talked about, 3 very important, you can say, body parts of news. First, he said, I want something which could grab my attention at once. This is point number 1 he talked about. Then he said, then I need something which could widen my knowledge. I mean, you can say the, length and the breadth, depth and the breadth, of that very story. So something which could widen, my knowledge. And then he said, something which could end by giving me a sensation of completed, statement, so that, I could feel, okay, fine. By reading the last line of that news report, I could feel it, oh yes, I have understood now the whole thing. This quotation actually is taking us towards a very typical, very orthodox, very conventional, but still extremely effective, extremely meaningful structure of news writing. What is that? That is, of course, all-time inverted pyramid, structure of news writing. What is inverted pyramid? Inverted pyramid means climax first and the details of that climax later. This is what actually inverted pyramid is. I mean, you can say we have two orders, ascending order and, of course, descending order. Now, in ascending order, what we do, we start from, let's say, 1 and we move towards 100. Ascend, we go up. Descending order is like we start from 100 and then we go down towards 1. Inverted pyramid is the same thing. You start from 100, you start from the climax. You start from the nitty-gritty. You start from the crux of the matter. And then you go down to the details and you finish at the dot. This is where actually this, pyramid was talking about. Now, the same quotation of John Updike I have, spread onto this inverted pyramid just to highlight 3 important points. What is the head of the news? What is the body of the news? And what is the toe of the news? Like, head means, as he said, I want something which could attract me at once, head of the news. And then, which could widen my knowledge. That's the body, the torso of the news. And then he says that something, finishing points also down deep there, and that is what the toe of the news. If I take you back towards the screen and see over there, I have drawn one inverted pyramid for you. And the same quote I have spread actually to illustrate the same 3 points, head, body, and toe. You can see the first slice, the uppermost slice, I have put in his first part of his quote that I want stories to startle and engage me within the first few sentences. Now, this is the first slice of the inverted pyramid, which is the uppermost slice, okay? And this, he said, startle and engage me within the first few sentences. This is what in journalistic language we call lead, L-E-A-D, lead. And then comes the second part of this quote, which says, in their middle, to widen or deepen or sharpen my knowledge of human activity. Now, what is this? This is the body, actually, the torso of my news. All right. So this is what? Sportive details and the nut graph. And then the third part and the last slice of this, a pyramid, and that is and to end by giving me a sensation of completeness or completed statement. This is what the close, the final wordings actually, maybe final quotes to sum up. So this is what the all-time, of course, conventional, but very effective and very meaningful structure of news. What? At the start comes lead. What's the function of the lead? From the John Updike's quotation we can see, lead's function is that it startles and it engages. Startles means, it at once grabs. I mean, if there are 10 pieces of news, this lead is going to, of course, invite that reader that first you read me, of course, through some tips and techniques, which, of course, news writers know. What type of words to use, what type of language to use, what facts to add, to the lead, which could really attract and which could really stand alone and could, stand off also the crowd of the news on, of course, the newspaper. So lead's function, startles, engages. And then sportive details and nut graph. What's its function? It widens the knowledge of the reader. It actually tells the details of the story. Or you can say it elaborates the lead actually. And the last one, of course, the concluding statements. Now, let's talk about what's the lead and how to write a lead actually. Dear, keep in mind, lead is not the headline of the news actually. Headline is a different thing. In our last class, we have talked about, what are headlines and how headlines are written and how headlines are translated actually into day-to-day, understanding or day-to-day conversation or day-to-day, language. Lead actually is, you can say, the first word, the first sentence, or the first paragraph of the news report. I repeat, lead is not headline. Lead is the first word, the first sentence, and the first paragraph of the news report. Sometimes, in certain cases, lead can be of 2 to 3 paragraphs also, but in rare cases. Because we know that lead has its range, range of words. 10 to 30 words is the ideal lead. Now, for example, let's say your lead is of one sentence, let's say. So it can be of 10 to 15 words. If it's of one paragraph, it can be of, let's say, 30 words. This is lead. And lead should answer 3 fundamental questions. Number 1, what, where, and when. This is what actually the function of lead is. Lead is the toughest part of news writing, frankly speaking. Because first is always important. First is always important. The first word on a blank page is difficult. The first stepping towards your goal is difficult. The opening is always difficult. Starting is always difficult. Starting of your career is always difficult. The starting of your course is always difficult. Right? Exactly the same way. Starting your news is difficult. And that is, of course, a lead. And lead's function is, what? It's what? It's a time of, these TV, radio, internet, they have eaten up all the readers. And they have changed all the readers into viewers and listeners. Okay, so what that job actually now is of newspaper people, the job is actually to make their news, to make their leads, to make the nut graphs, so attractive, so powerful, so that, readers in those 5, 6 seconds, which usually people actually give to the news papers could win, time for the whole story, to be read by. Therefore, newspaper people or the news reporters, they have to work really hard actually in writing very good, at least leads. Now, I'm going to discuss with you how to write a good lead. Rule number 1, part of which I discussed with you before also, that lead is the one which is going to be very short. Now, first of all, don't make very long sentences in the very early part of your news. To say, don't give multiple sentences, to your lead. It has to be, let's say, 3 to 30 word long, and it should answer 3 questions, of course. What, when, and why. Example for you to share, like on your screen, you can see a wonderful lead. Fire destroyed a house on Main Street early Monday morning. If we analyze this sentence, you would see all the 3 W's are present in it. What is present? Like fire destroyed a house. Now, this is what actually is the main story, or you can say main idea of the news. And then comes, let's say, on Main Street, this is the where, the place. Early Monday morning, this is, of course, the time. All 3 W's are present. Number 2, this sentence, is of only 10 words long. So, the whole story has been summed up in only 10 words. This is what actually is called lead. In the, next part or the next paragraphs or the next sentences of the story, of course, news reporters are going to elaborate, of course, the same, lead. Second rule of writing lead is the lead's first verb should express the main what of the story and should be placed among the lead's first 7 words. What this rule says? This rule says that the first verb, of course, there is going to be a verb in your lead, in your sentence. The first verb, should express the main what, and it should be, in the first 7 words of, the lead sentence or the lead paragraph. The sentence which I discussed with you when I explained you what lead is, if we go back again to the same sentence and see whether that sentence, verb of that sentence is about the what factor of the story and is it in the first 7, words, let's take a look. fire destroyed a house on Main Street early Monday morning. You see, the word is destroyed, the verb is destroyed, and it's only the second word in our sentence. And it is, of course, talking about the what factor. I mean, fire is subject, okay? And what happened? Fire did what? Fire destroyed. Right second word is the verb, which is describing what of it. And if I give you one more sentence to compare with, where, the main verb of the lead will not, describe the what factor of the story. Let's take a look. There was fire on Main Street early Monday morning, which destroyed a house. There was fire on Main Street. Now, in this sentence, the first verb of the sentence is there was. Now, was actually means, of course, it's a verb which shows condition actually, and this is not describing what of it. Actually, it's describing where of it. I mean, there was a fire on Main Street. There was a fire. So this is showing place actually. So this violates actually good, lead writing principle. So what I said so far is that lead, number one, keep it short, 10 to 30 words. Should answer 3 questions: what, when, and where. This is rule number 1. Rule number 2 is the first verb of the lead should describe what factor, and it should be in the first 7 words. These are 2 rules you have to keep in mind, when you, of course, write leads. Let's move ahead. The third rule of lead writing is the lead's first verb, the same one that expresses the main what of the story, should be active voice, not passive voice. After that verb which we've just talked about, we have to take this care also that our sentence, the lead sentence, has to be active voice. Take it this way: if your lead is of a paragraph form, there is not one sentence. Let's say there are more than 1, 2, or 3 sentences, okay, in that lead paragraph. We are only concerned with the first sentence and its first verb, which describes what of it. It has to be in active form, not passive form. Let's, understand this point with the help of the same example. Like fire destroyed. Fire is the subject. Destroyed is what? This is the verb. And a house on Main Street, a house is object. So we see the pattern is subject, verb, and object. This is, of course, active pattern. I mean, importance actually has been given, of course, to the subject, and then, of course, to the action. If we change the same sentence, into passive, for example, you would see the whole impact of the lead will be, of course, gone. Like a house was destroyed by fire. Now, this version of the sentence, a house is, of course, the subject now, which is a part of course, your verb. Verb completing element as object. A house was destroyed by fire on Main Street early Monday morning. Now, this will be the passive. So keep in mind, we are not concerned with the second or third sentence. We are concerned with that sentence in which lead answers what of the story. Verb of that sentence has to be, in active form. This is actually what we are talking about. If there are any sentences which separately, talk about in the lead paragraph, where and when, if they are in in any other form, that's not our concern. We are talking about the what sentence, its verb should be in active. Next point is, if there is a who involved in the story, the lead should give some indication of who the who is. Now, if that story is about some, famous person, elites make, stories. If some elite is involved or some celeb is involved, in that stuff, that is, of course, who. Of course, his name we are going to mention, right in the beginning, and then, the remaining part of it. That who has to be answered if that who is important elite. If that who is not important person, but still who is involved in your lead, then don't give his name, just mention that was it a boy or a young man or an old man or an old lady, but no name to give in the lead. Yes, somewhere deep down in, the body of the news, of course, you can talk about the names of those, affected people. But if that person is important, you need to give his name right, in the beginning of that lead. Okay, let's now move towards our fifth and the last rule which we need to follow when we make or write a lead. That rule says a lead should overall hook the reader with a focus on the action. Here, a lead is going to attract, and lead is going to have strong focus. Let me illustrate this point with the help of one example. You can see example 2. Two sentences are there. One I labeled as no and second as yes. Let's first read the no. The city council met last night. Now, in this sentence, the city council met last night, of course, is an active sentence. In this sentence, the focus is on, of course, the when factor, actually, time factor, whereas, let's say, where is missing, and of course, the main idea, or you can say the what factor is missing. Now, here, this such kind of lead, of course, cannot hook, cannot show focus or offer focus, of course, to the reader. The same sentence, like, we can revise and write this way. Business taxes were raised a whopping 30% on a 6-to-1 vote of the city council last night. Now, in this sentence, if we compare this one, it's a complete lead, which is going to answer, of course, all the three questions: what, where, and when. Dear students, these are 5 principles or the rules of, good lead writing. If I, revise for you, the first one, of course, is that keep your lead short. Don't write longer sentences in lead paragraph. 3 to 10 words, 10 to 30 words, and it should answer 3 questions: what, when, and where. Number 2, the first verb of the lead sentence, it should describe what factor. And number 3, this sentence, the verb actually, which describes what factor, should be in active form. And number 4, if you need to mention who of your lead, now here there are 2 considerations actually. If who is an elite, then of course you're going to start your sentence from the name of that elite and then onwards what, when, and where, elements. And if that who is not important, but still, like, it's very much part and parcel of the story, then that person, generally you can address like a boy or a girl or a man or a woman or a lady or a, some gentleman. So this is how, like, you can make your lead. And the last and the most important point, I would say, lead should be highly attractive to hook the readers. And number 2, it should offer a very strong focus. Let's move now towards the nut graph. Nut graph answers 2 very important, questions. Number 1, why? I mean, a reporter is going to ask himself this question, and of course, he's going to answer these also, that why he's writing this news and why his readers should read it. This is something important. Look here, nut graph comes somewhere, in the, let's say, second last, if they are total, let's say, 5 paragraphs. So nut graph, you can put in the last part of the third, and the whole fourth paragraph can be of nut graph. In nut graph, we of course answer why factor, and we try, like, here to quote official or unofficial sources, technical people, words of the wise we try to quote, and this is how we strengthen, we introduce, power to our writing. This is what the function of nut graph is. Let's say we are going to write a lead, and there is Neil Hobbs' first, 5 formula of, like, this report writing or news writing. I mean, news writing is now the one which I'm going to give you this formula, like 5 paragraphs we are going to write in a news. The first paragraph is going to be, of course, the lead paragraph, which is going to have its strong focus. It is going to be short and it's going to be memorable. The first paragraph, which is going to be the main idea, which is going to be the climax of your story, the most important part, which is going to grab and, of course, startle and, of course, going to attract the readers. Lead paragraph. Second paragraph of your story is going to amplify your lead. I mean, you can say other primary, information which can support the lead. in the third paragraph, or the third paragraph of your news report should give the sportive details now. Or you can say the belly actually of your report. All the possible sportive details which are very much part and parcel of your news, you can, of course, put in the third paragraph. Fourth paragraph is going to be your nut graph, in which you're going to answer why. That why this news is important. You can write here quotes, you can write here, words of different people involved. For example, if we were like, talking about, some fire stuff and all, then here you can write direct words of the fire, fighting people. Or if you are reporting, let's say, an emergency, like, which doctors handled very nicely, so you can, of course, quote in this paragraph the views and the words of the doctors. And, of course, the people, like, who are affected by, you can write, their direct lines also to make, of course, I don't want to use the word drama, but, of course, to introduce dramatic, some aspects of that story also. And the fifth paragraph, of course, will be the sum up paragraph that you can sum up, of course, on the remainants, like, the remaining interesting quotes that people's, that propel meaning actually. But please keep in mind, the last quote of your, news report should not be fluffy or flashy, which could act as a wall and could, like, die out the whole impression of your story. This is what a 5-paragraph news report is. First paragraph, your lead, very attractive one, very powerful one. Second paragraph, the primary and secondary information about the lead, which could amplify it. Third paragraph, sportive details. Fourth paragraph, the nut graph, in which you're going to answer why this is important. And the last paragraph, some very, very, very relevant quote, one quote only, to wind up the whole story, which could propel meanings, not block meanings. This is what your news writing is all about. Now, I would like to discuss with you 10 guidelines to clear news writing. Now, these guidelines are going to be very important. You can say these are do's and don'ts of your news writing, that what you should do and what you should not. Like the first important guideline which I can offer you and which I strongly advise you that you follow it, that please in your sentences try to, sum up one single idea. I mean to say one idea per second. This is my first advice I would give you. Doesn't matter it's a lead or it's a nut graph or it's like the wind up of your news. Try to pack one idea in your sentence. Like I can give you one example. On your screen you can see the first sentence, which I labeled as no. In it you would see there are more than one ideas. Like Columbian High School in Littleton experienced the largest of recent high school murder rampages last week, and Deakin schools along with police are reacting to a rumor of violence at Deakin High School. In this sentence, we do not have one single idea actually. There are more than one, okay? Now, what we need to do is, of course, we need to write two sentences so that, our one sentence can have one and second sentence could have second. For example, the revised version is over there. School officials and police are reacting quickly to a rumored threat of violence at Deakin High School, full stop. Now, this is one idea. This is what actually I meant, that one idea per second. And the second sentence, the response follows last week's high school massacre in Littleton. The first sentence is, of course, the lead stuff. And the second sentence is, you can say, the primary and the secondary information. I'm not calling lead as primary because lead is, you can say, the climax stuff, the main idea stuff. And then, the remaining parts of the story, they again talk about primary, secondary, and then, the nut graphs and, of course, and the close stuff and all. Second advice which I would like to give you is that limit your sentence, the sentence length. First we said one sentence, one idea. The second thing is, the sentence length should also be very controlled. Keep it short. Keep it very short, I would say. If you remember, in early classes, we talked about that a sentence length, well, its range is 3 to 30 sentences, okay? And an average one is, 17. All right. Yes, you can take it, let's say, to average wise, I'm talking, but you can take it, let's say, to 20. You can go as average, doesn't matter, will be fine. But don't try to cross. If your sentence is, reach, let's say, 40 word, I mean, a sentence reaches 40, split it into two. Again, an example on your screen. The first sentence is of 38 words. And if you see the second sentence, the same sentence, we shortened actually to 12:1 and 12 again second. We split the first sentence into two because the rule number one is, one sentence, one idea. Since there were two ideas, so we made two, and 12 word one sentence, 12 word, second sentence. So this is how we can do it. Let's move towards our third important advice, that is about the structure. If you remember, we once talked about basic clause patterns, different structures of your sentences. To attain clarity in your sentences, try to follow this very structure, which is the most important, and then, somewhere inside, you can follow some other structure patterns, but most part of especially, the early part of your, like the lead and the amplification, and of course, the sportive detail. In these, early part of your news report, try to follow, subject, verb, and object pattern, because I believe this is the most effective structure for clear meanings, to be delivered. If you see on the screen, first sentence, Moga, who worked as a bursar at DePaul University in Chicago prior to working at Beloit, said she missed the university environment. Now, this sentence, of course, does not follow SVO. It has to be changed into SVO, and see how effectively we've done it. Moga was a bursar at Chicago's DePaul University before her Beloit job, full stop. The first sentence stopped, now the second starts. She misses, or she missed, the university environment. So this is how, like, we introduced S for subject, V for verb, O for all, this pattern. Of course, there are many other patterns also. SVO pattern is, of course, best for your, news reports, especially for the early paragraphs. I'm repeated, again and again telling you this. This is something important for your early paragraphs. In the deeper depths of your story, of course, you can, bring variety in. That, doesn't matter. The next one is use strong verbs and active voice. Verbs are going to be, the best thing is, like in style, we also talked about one word substitution is good. But when we go for the one word substitution, make sure that, those words are familiar. Those words, your readers can easily understand. Do not, bring in such words which could act as a wall, between you and your readers. Because, words are to be chosen carefully so that, meanings could be shared. If words are chosen this way, that, meanings simply like, a wall is there between you and your reader. So then, of course, purpose is, of course, not served. Example for you, the poem will be read by Latore, and this is in a passive structure. Its active will be Latore will read the poem. Now, it's, of course, active, and meanings are, of course, cleared the way they should be, of course. Next one, reduced difficult words to their simplest terms. Of course, the same thing which I was talking about, that if you want to introduce clarity to your, this news report, try to use short and familiar, structure. And of course, try to avoid wordiness so that, meanings could be enhanced. Like example is there, the search committee will be constructed in accordance with Article 8 of the NIU Constitution. Now, if we want to simplify the sentence, we are going to follow, F.W. Fowler's golden advice that prefer shorter words over longer word, or you can say prefer shortly spelled words over longly spelled words, or you can say prefer familiar words over, unfamiliar words. So this is how, this rule if you follow, then of course you're not going to use such words which, will not be sort of like, conversational, which will be, of course, if you remember, we used to talk about, Latinate and Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon is something, of course, which are words which are, of course, powerful, and words which are more conversational, words, which are more familiar, actually, and words which are safer also, because that using these words, meanings are going to be shared. And if you are using Latinate words, for example, of course, you will be in doubt, you'll be unsure that my average readers will understand or not. And if you remember, we once talked about, readability thing. In readability also, which was actually the ratio of simple words and difficult word ratio. And of course, then the, what you call, words per second ratio, Over there also we see that if you do not know who are your readers, then you have to check your readability. And readability formula, of course, 8 and 12, if your findings come out by applying that formula. What is actually that? That is, you can say intermediate level of language, which could be, understood or followed by average number of people. If you're 10, then you have to see most, it should not be either very simple or it should not be very difficult. So that policy, if you follow, of course, meanings will surely be there, the one, in your mind, of course, the one in your reader's mind. Like example, same one we can simplify this way. NIU's constitution dictates the search committee's makeup. Simple sentence, simple words, simply meanings conveyed. Next one is, do not back into a sentence. In your news report, do not back into a sentence. What does it mean? Let's see the sentence. The end of the academic year and the end of the legislative session were two reasons Dr. Wall cited. This is what actually we call do not back into a sentence. If we change the sentence, it's this way. Dr. Wall cited two reasons. We put in here colon, the end of the academic year and the end of the legislative session. This sentence is not. This is, of course, the way, the sentence should start from the front of it, front of the idea, not from the back of the idea. This is what actually we say. Do not back into a sentence. Moving ahead, don't use more than 3 numbers in any one sentence. Numbers, of course, they confuse, readers. Numbers could be in any form. Of course, they're going to confuse readers. Frankly speaking, 1 or 2 are fine, but when you pack in your sentence 3, 4, 5 numbers, your readers, of course, will be confused. You'll be confused, their relationships, of course, with each other. So try to limit numbers which you are introducing, into your sentence. For example, wonderful sentence in which you would find lots and lots of numbers. I would say a wonderful package for your readers to be confused. It goes this way. Wednesday, the NIU baseball team's winless streak hit 22 as NIU 4-3-7-1 dropped a twin bill to Miami 21-1-8-1, 8-2 and 10-5 at Oxford, Ohio. It's something which I would say is for the readers to be perplexed, actually. Confused totally. The same sentence, you can simplify in terms of numbers this way. Oxford, Ohio, NIU's baseball losing streak reached 22 as the Huskies dropped a double header Wednesday to Miami 8-2 and 10-5. So this is how numbers are. You can reorder numbers, or you can see if you can omit numbers from your sentence if they are not you can say unavoidable. Let's move towards our next rule, and that is choose the precise word. The precision of your words is also very important, which has to be taken care of. Like if you see on your screen such a long paragraph, 2 sentences, 53 words are there. Now the same paragraph, if we reduce, it will be this way. This will increase the center's weekly capacity from 55 children to 200, and while current center takes children ages 2 to 6, to new center will take infants too. So this is all you can shorten the sentences and introduce the element of precision. The precise words, of course, are important. for, the successful meanings. And the last golden rule, that is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Now, this is actually, the stupid thing is, I'm meant to add stress to my sentence, that, keep it simple, stupid. Simplicity is, I would say, the jewel in writing. Sentence structure should be simple. The lexical choices, should be simple. And ideas, of course, if your sentences are multiple, so when you break those ideas into smaller pieces, which are acceptable actually, then of course, your sentence, I believe, will be readable more and understandable more. My dear students, this is what I wanted to discuss with you all about this news writing, news report writing. If I try to recapitulate some very important points which we discussed today, that what is news? News is, of course, something which is out of the ordinary. Not every event, not every happening can be called a news, of course. News has to be new, something which people want to read and talk about. And news writing has its own typical structure. It's not an essay thing, like you have an intro, then you have, sportive details, and then closing. Unlike essay, it has its own typical structure. Like, it starts from the climax, actually, whereas essay may not start from the climax. It starts from the climax and then slowly narrows down, of course, to the closing. The opening of our news is called the lead, which is the most important. The function of lead is that it attracts the readers and it offers them, you can say, the précis of the whole news, climax of the whole news, the main idea of the news. And then, of course, you have sportive details and the nut graph and the closing thing. The 5-paragraph news structure I discussed with you, that if you want to write a news, in your first paragraph should be the lead. Second paragraph should amplify the lead. Third paragraph can have sportive details. Fourth paragraph discuss the nut graph, which is very important, like lead. If lead is important, nut graph is also important. It tells readers why this news is important. And the last paragraph, of course, in nut graph paragraph also you can have some quotes, but in the last paragraph, one quote, which is, you can say, such a sum up quote, which propels meanings, does not act as a wall, actually, and loses the whole, impression of your news. And then I discussed with you 10 important principles which you need to follow in news writing. And of course, you are going to use active, you are going to use short and familiar sentences, you're going to use short and familiar, structures, short and familiar words also, and do not try to, use multiple sentences. Keep your sentences short. And very last important principle is that keep everything simple for your readers. Your words simple, your structure simple, your idea simple. If it's multiple, break it down to smaller sentences. And this is how, you introduce and offer meanings effectively and, of course, meaningfully. With this, take care of yourself. See you next time. Bye-bye.